Hello everyone, I am Triple J and welcome to Brain Food at the Movies, where I'll be discussing DC's latest attempt at making a good superhero movie called Suicide Squad. And quite frankly, I'm still thinking whether it's a good or bad movie. I'm actually quite confused as to which one it is, because for as much good as the movie did, and it did do quite a bit, there's just as much, if not more, that completely levels it out. For those of you who don't know, Suicide Squad is a title from DC Comics that was run throughout the 80s. It was a Black Ops team by the U.S. government run by Amanda Waller, aka The Wall, aka one of the few people in the DC universe, any universe, that Batman does not want to mess with. Gathering a group of supervillains in order to go on terrible missions that might get them killed, these supervillains are, if they succeed, granted amnesty or perks or even time off their double or triple life sentences. And it's called Suicide Squad because, as I said before, one, these missions could very well result in their death, and two, they have a bomb implanted in their neck. If at any time they tried to run away, boop boop, kaboom goes the head. This movie is, well, an origin movie, talks about the gathering of the squad, the origins of the various members of the squad, and their very first mission. And it's a complete and utter mess of a storyline. I found it to be a bit confusing at times. However, before we get into that, let's talk about what good DC did with this movie. For starters, there was humor in this movie. I was in a packed theater, and just about every joke that was told landed. Everyone laughed. We were having, a good time at the humor. In fact, the person who surprised me the most in providing much of the humor, it wasn't Deadshot, played by Will Smith, and it wasn't, let's see here, Margot Robbie, who played Harley Quinn, although she did provide quite a bit of humor herself. It was Jai Courtney, who played Captain Boomerang. Captain Boomerang was surprisingly funny and hilarious character. There are several times in the film I'm actually trying not to crack up too much just thinking about it right now. In fact, one part of the movie that I quite enjoyed was near the end. Flax, who is the U.S. military liaison who goes out on these missions with the Suicide Squad, takes the remote control that controls the detonators in their neck, smashes it and goes, "You're free to go," without missing a beat. It's great comedic timing. Captain Boomerang goes. Much of Jai Courtney's performance in this movie is centered around humor. His interaction with El Diablo was just utterly hilarious. I almost recommend this movie just to watch his jokes alone. Another thing the movie did was to provide a diverse group of people. We have Will Smith as Deadshot, Viola Davis as Amanda Waller, Margot Robbie as Harley Quinn, Karen Kurohara as Katana, Jay Hernandez as El Diablo, and it's just a fantastic mix of characters. We actually have not had this kind of diversity from Marvel films for a long time. Only recently in Captain America Civil War were we able to get that kind of diversity. So DC did good with that. They introduced magic. Just straight out say, hey, this is magic. We've got magic. We've got goddesses. We've got monsters. In fact, the Enchantress is under Amanda Waller's control in part of this movie. And she tells these generals and everything, yeah, this is a witch. Believe it or not, she's been around for thousands of years. She'll be around for thousands of years after we're gone. And I really do appreciate that. As much as I love Thor in the Marvel movies, well, up until Doctor Strange recently, still not entirely sure how they're going to introduce magic there. They've said, no, this is super high science. This isn't magic. So I really do appreciate to say, hey, this is a world where we have super science and we have super magic. We get a better showing of Batman in this film than we got in Batman vs. Superman. Along with the fantastic spot-on writing for Amanda Waller, aka The Wall, we get a really great spot where the military brass asks her, how did you get your hands on Deadshot, this infamous assassin? And she says, I didn't. I just left the tip with a guy in Gotham. Cut to Batman finding Deadshot, who is out with his daughter. He shows up and goes, hey man, I can take you down now, but let's not do this in front of your daughter. Come quietly. And I just like that showing of, compassion and kindness from Batman, even to someone who has killed hundreds of people for money. There's a scene in which he rescues Harley Quinn after she nearly gets killed by the Joker. Again, showing compassion for enemies. And he doesn't destroy the car they're in with those giant 50 caliber machine guns that he was just blowing crooks away in Batman vs. Superman. So I was kind of shocked. We got a good Batman. It's amazing. Many of the cast put in a fantastic performance, actually doing really rather well with the mediocre, weak sauce material that they were given to work with in the first place. I've said, Amanda Waller is just fantastic. Viola Davis plays her perfectly. Will Smith, really good as Deadshot. Margot Robbie is just great as Harley Quinn when her camera is not fucking focused on her ass and those hot shorts. But the one that I was really truly impressed by was Jay Hernandez as El Diablo. He took this, let's just say it, El Diablo is almost a complete utter racist caricature of a Latino gangster with domestic violence issues. His whole story is that as his power grew, his power on the streets as a gang lord grew, to the point where his wife, who is unfortunately done up as a, emasculating or, condescending, yelling, arguing, loud Latino woman, his wife and his 2 kids are accidentally killed by him when he loses control. It's really terrible source material, and yet Jay Hernandez's performance is just wonderful. I really like the performance. I hated the material, but I liked the performance. And his whole character arc was something really rather good. He starts off as this gang lord. He goes to being almost a complete pacifist, saying, I don't want to do this. Look at what I've done. I cannot do this. I'm not interested in being a weapon. To learning to embrace his powers and even the guilt of what he done, thanks in part to Harley Quinn, that leads to helping to save the day. And I just really loved it. It was so good. Unfortunately, the bad really does seem to outweigh all the good that this movie does, and thus brings the grade of this movie way down in my opinion. From this point on, there will be more spoiler information, so if you're not interested in hearing about it, please stop now, and you can go see the movie for yourself and make your own decisions. But as for the bad, let's start off with the casting of Adam Beach as Slipknot. I know nothing about this character. They introduced him as someone who can climb anything. And he's introduced for all 5 minutes before being killed off by Flax to show what happens when you try to run away. That's a bad showing. We literally have almost next to no native characters in superherodom, and you have one native supervillain show up just to be killed off. That's bad. I find that almost all the women in this film are heavily tied into the men in their lives. Of course, we know about Harley Quinn's origin being tied into the Joker, which is really toxic and abusive, and they go with that in this movie. It was really, really quite uncomfortable to watch. And I'm still not entirely sure if the movie was saying this was abusive and toxic. I certainly found it abusive and toxic. But we have the Enchantress, who's only controlled, again, not just because Amanda Waller has her heart and can stab it a whole bunch of times, but because she's in love with Sergeant Flax. We have Katana, who wields a sword that her husband's soul is stuck into. That she only became Katana because her husband was killed. I just found it to be really poor writing for all these women. And even though they're fantastically played, you could have come up with something better for the women here. Also, speaking of the women, all the women were showing skin. Honestly, I'm not just talking about Harley Quinn's hot pants, but for some reason Katana is wearing, some kind of midriff showing binding. The Enchantress is wearing something like you would see in Red Sonja. And all the men are fully clothed. I don't get it. Come on. You can do better than that. The romance between Rick Flag and June Moon, who is the host for the Enchantress, is utterly boring. I didn't see any chemistry there. I couldn't buy into it. So those kinds of stakes raised in the movie, where Flag is also trying to save June from the Enchantress, despite the Enchantress, trying to conquer the world, of course. I just didn't buy into it all that much. The plot is a hot mess. Basically, the Suicide Squad is sent in to save Amanda Waller, and then later on to save her again and stop the bad guys. The only problem being that the bad guys are out because Amanda Waller lost control of the Enchantress, who went and found her other evil god brother, and released him into the world. Which I felt, undermined Amanda Waller's character. She doesn't make hot messes, at least as far as I can remember. She cleans them up. That's the Wall's job. And then we have Jared Leto's Joker. Yes, the rapist himself, as he was accused by several women of sexually assaulting them. His Joker is so completely, utterly boring, and it contributes nothing to the story. Outside of anything having to do with Harley Quinn's origin as Harley Quinn, there's nothing he contributes to this story. At the most, he shows up to save Harley Quinn, but then his helicopter crashes. She goes back to the Suicide Squad. That's it. That's an entire contribution to the movie. And if you can look at a character's contribution to any movie, heck, any story, and think, yeah, I could cut that out and I'd lose nothing, congratulations. You're a useless waste of space and airtime. And I just find it utterly hilarious, because over the last year, or heck, ever since this movie went in production, we've been hearing stories about how he sent dead pigs to people. His fellow castmates used condoms. The director, David Ayer, was going, I don't know where or Jared Leto begins and the Joker ends, or anything like that. And the total amount of time he's in the movie, less than 10 minutes. That's fucking hilarious. Heck, every other cast photo, group photo I've seen, where they're all smiling together and having a good time, excludes Jared Leto. That's just how little he matters to this movie and to the cast. Margot Robbie herself doesn't understand why people think it's good that Harley Quinn is in a relationship with this guy. It's just, the only way I can sum up this Joker is, imagine an edgy edgelord from Reddit, usually in one of the subreddits that talks about, ethics in gaming journalism, for example, who has a trust fund, who dresses up overly in expensive material and necklaces and rings and everything just to show off how much money he has, who listen to way too much gangster rap to show again how edgy he is. And that's the Joker. He's nothing compared to all the other Jokers. Every other Joker is memorable and fun and brought something unique to the story. Everyone from Cesar Romero, Mark Hamill, Jack Nicholson, Kevin Michael Richardson, and Heath Ledger. Oh, and one more thing. Heath Ledger was a method actor too. But when Christopher Nolan said cut, Heath Ledger was like, oh, okay, he was a good guy. He was a great actor. He had fun on set. There's a picture of him performing an ollie on a skateboard over Batman. And Christian Bale had to have been like, yeah, that's cool. Let's have fun. Sorry, Jared Leto. Actually, no, not sorry. You're a pathetic waste of space, a rapist, an asshole, a transphobe, and I'm so glad that you were cut so much out of this movie. Fuck you, Jared Leto. The emotional highs and peaks that this movie strives for, that try to get you to believe that this group of supervillains bonded together as a family in order to save the day, just does not work. In fact, it flops terribly. If you want a better example of a group of misfits coming together to save the day, watch Guardians of the Galaxy. That was far more believable, had even less of an origin type story than Suicide Squad did, and two of the characters in that movie were entirely CGI generated. All in all though, despite the humor, despite the really good performances put on by all the actors and actresses, the weak material of the script, the bad plotting, the really bad editing, all the good gets balanced out by all the bad, so that we are left with a superhero equivalent of tofu. It looks and tastes unappetizing. It has some nutritional value to it, but you can find something better to whet your appetite with, such as Guardians of the Galaxy. It does show on one hand that DC is learning, so it gives me some hope that the Wonder Woman movie will be just as good as that amazing trailer, or that Justice League will be just as good as that great trailer. But then again, this movie had a really good trailer, and look how the movie was. See it or not, trust me, you're going to be disappointed if you're a Joker fan. That makes me laugh. He got cut out of so much of the movie. I'm Triple J. That's all I got left to say. Take care.
My things are getting so